Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Becky. I've had type 1 diabetes for 17 years now, and today I'm going to be taking it back, way back to the beginning to share my diagnosis story with you. Now, the reason why I'm sharing my diagnosis story right now is because I had my 17-year diaversary recently, a couple of weeks ago. And I was thinking about how far I've come since my diagnosis and kind of reflecting on my diagnosis time of my life and remembering how scared and anxious and honestly overwhelmed and clueless I felt about type 1 diabetes at the time of diagnosis. So I wanted to kind of share this video for anyone who might be newly diagnosed and feels any of those emotions, feels terrified, has no idea what's coming, to kind of, show you that those kind of feelings are completely normal at diagnosis. Most of us will experience something like that. Everyone gets diagnosed in different ways, but there are a lot of similar underlying feelings, and it will be okay. It's been a long journey to get me to where I am with my diabetes. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll kind of know how I'm feeling about my diabetes currently, and it's definitely not a straight journey. It kind of has ebbs and flows, but you learn a lot really quickly. And yeah, if you've just been diagnosed or recently been diagnosed, then just know that everything's going to be okay. So let's just jump into the story. For a bit of context, when I was 6 years old, so it was the summer before going into year 2 in primary school, we went on a family holiday to America, which was amazing, like the best time I've ever had in my life. And we were there for like 2 weeks. I was eating loads of good food. We had an amazing time. But weirdly, I had started from then to kind of lose weight, which was obviously strange considering I'd gone on holiday and like eaten everything. And then obviously I came back, I went back to school, and the school year starts at the beginning of September. The end of September is my birthday, and by then I'd kind of continued to gradually lose weight. But by my birthday, I'd become to get really tired and exhausted all of the time. And my parents weren't really sure if it had something to do with just going back to school and it being the start of a new school year, and obviously having that change from holidays to starting school when you are a young child is a whole change of routine and can really tire you out. So my parents were kind of aware that something wasn't quite right, but again, they just weren't sure what to chalk it up to. I then started getting really thirsty all of the time, which I think is when my parents kind of knew that it wasn't just the normal kind of school stuff and going to the loo all the time. I would get up 3 times in the night to go to the loo or more, and at that point my mum thought maybe it was a UTI, so she was going to take me to the doctors. And then I'm not sure exactly what happened. Obviously I was 6 years old, so a lot of this isn't crystal clear in my mind, but instead of making a normal appointment, something happened. I think I might have been really sick or really ill, and she managed to make an emergency appointment at my GP because she thought I needed to be seen quite urgently. Clearly I looked like a very ill child at this point. And I remember it was an emergency appointment because I remember it being like, right, stop playing, we're going to the doctors. And I remember it being really dark and really late. So we go to the GP and we talk through my symptoms, and she says to me, I remember the doctor saying, we're going to need to prick your finger to take some blood. And obviously as a now 7-year-old child, that was a terrifying thought to me. I did not want to do it. I remember crying, telling my mum like, no, it's fine, I feel better, like I don't need this done, I'll be okay. And my mum was just like, no Becca, like you need to have this done, and like calming me down. And I remember my mum popping me on her lap and saying like, everything's gonna be fine, I'll hold your hand while she does it, I'll be here, I'll stroke your palm, like trying to keep me calm so that the doctor could take my blood. She does a blood test, and again, I can't remember the exact number, but I remember it being somewhere in the 30s, which if you're in America is about 540, 550, so obviously big alarm bells then for the doctor. So I remember she says to my mum, look, you're going to need to take her to hospital, and you're going to need to take an overnight bag because it's very likely that you're going to need to be staying overnight, possibly a couple of days, depending on the diagnosis. I can't give a diagnosis here and now, and they'll need to do more tests at the hospital, but I'm going to phone ahead. I'll let them know that you're coming. So we drove home, and I remember just feeling in the car that my mum was really scared. Obviously as a child you go to the doctor all the time for like a sniffle, and everything normally works out okay. You're poorly for a couple of days, but I remember just in the car having this feeling that mum knows there's something that's not right. Mum knows there's maybe danger. Really sorry if you can hear those cars going past, by the way, but yeah, just mum's not right. So we drove home, and the hospital was actually quite a far drive from where we used to live. We kind of lived in the middle of nowhere. So we get home, we explain to my dad what's happening. They pack an overnight bag for me and my mum. My dad stays home with my brother because they don't want to have to take him all the way to hospital and worry about him and what he's doing, because he's only 2 years older than me. At this point he hadn't had his birthday either, so he was only 8. And yeah, they just wanted whichever parent was with me to be able to focus solely on me. So my mum takes us to the hospital. They check me in. I remember they do loads more tests, and then the doctor comes over, and I remember he shuts the like privacy thing, which I'd seen him talk to loads of other kids in the ward. It was one of those wards where it's just like an open ward with loads of beds, and he just tracked them without like moving anything, like just out in the open. But he shut the curtain when he came to talk to me and my mum, so I knew it was something that was serious, something that needed like privacy, although realistically you can hear through a curtain. And he talks to my mum and to me, and he says Becca has type 1 diabetes. I had no idea what any kind of diabetes was, and I remember my mum just cried, like not loudly and not hysterically, because obviously she wanted to try and like keep it together for me, but I remember my mum just getting a bit shaky and teary and crying a bit. And at this point, seeing my mum this scared, I thought I was going to die. I thought I was dying. I thought I'd been given a death sentence. Yeah, I was really, really scared. So my mum kind of senses that I'm scared because I have no idea what's going on, and she turns to me and she says, "You're okay, you're going to be fine, but I just need to talk to the doctor to find out what we're going to do to keep you healthy," or something along those lines. Like I remember her coming over and reassuring me, and then going over to speak to the doctor. So her and the doctor have a conversation, comes back, and she tells me again, like, everything's going to be fine, but there's going to be a lot of things that are going to have to change for both of us to manage diabetes, and so we're going to have to stay in the hospital for a few days while they teach us everything we're going to need to know to kind of manage your diabetes. And she says it's fine, you're still going to be able to live a normal life like all of the other kids at school, you're just going to have to do a couple of things differently. But yeah, that's kind of where things were. She obviously then phones my dad. He comes into the hospital with my brother now that we have a diagnosis, and because like I missed my brother, so we played together for a bit while my mum and dad spoke about like what the arrangements were going to be. And from then on, I can't remember exactly how long I was in the hospital. I think it was around like 4 to 5 days, and I don't really remember a lot about being in the hospital. The main things I remember were that obviously I was checked in on the 3rd of November, so I missed bonfire night, which as a 7-year-old child I was devastated about, especially because my dad took my brother to go and see the fireworks, because obviously he shouldn't have to miss out because of me being in hospital. So my brother got to go to the fireworks, and they came to the hospital afterwards to say hi, and he was so excited, and he'd had such a great time, and I was just so upset that I couldn't go and see the fireworks, but me and my mum watched them from outside the hospital window. And I remember I had to eat the like diabetic safe food in the hospital, which I just remember being really gross and being so upset. Like they bring the lunch or like dinner trolley round to the ward, all the kids get given like jelly and like chocolate crunch and all this like really yummy stuff and sandwiches and jacket potatoes, and I'm there with like a boiled egg salad and no dessert, and I remember just feeling so upset that I couldn't eat what everyone else was going to be able to eat, and I thought that's what my life was going to be like forever. I didn't know that it was kind of an intermediary measure. And also at this point my mum didn't know what the future was going to look like, so she didn't want to promise me anything because she didn't know what a diabetic diet has to look like or if it has to be different. So I'm just really upset being like, I'm never gonna eat chocolate again, and my mum can't tell me otherwise because she doesn't know yet either. So I remember that being really tricky. Obviously eventually the doctors came and they spoke to mainly my mum because I'm too young to understand anything myself. Understand that my treatment is going to change and progress over the next few months as I become more confident and capable of doing certain aspects like injecting and measuring my blood sugar and working out correction doses and carb counting eventually. But they said I'm kind of too young to do that myself, and obviously my mum isn't going to be there like at school if I'm having a school dinner. So for now I was on like fixed insulin doses, but I'll come back to that later. But yeah, when we left hospital after a few days, I remember my mum did everything for me for a while. So she did all of my finger pricks and all of my injections, and I was told to just practice injecting in an orange. So I started doing my own finger pricks I think a few weeks later, like just before Christmas, and then injections I remember I started doing in January. But for that intermediary time, obviously eventually I went back to school I think after a week or so, and my mum would come in every day at lunchtime to do my finger prick and my injection because I just had to keep a food diary and have fixed insulin doses, and I wasn't allowed to eat certain foods, obviously ones that are going to spike your blood sugar a lot, just like in the short like intermediary period, which didn't end up being that short. I remember it taking a really long time for them to teach me and my family how to carb count and how to adjust insulin doses. I swear I didn't do that for like 3 years. So yeah, for a long time my mum would come in, give me my fixed insulin dose, but because the good thing about the insulin dose being fixed was that it meant I didn't have to do any calculations. So when it got to January and when I was comfortable kind of injecting myself, I just knew exactly how much insulin to do and could just do it, and I didn't have to make any adjustments myself. But I remember being really scared because back then it was just syringes, there was no insulin pens, it was just syringes, and obviously they look a lot more medical. The needles are a bit longer, and it took me a really long time to do each injection because every single time I was terrified that it was going to hurt. But obviously my parents kind of made me do it because I can't have my mum following me around like when I'm 18 years old still not able to inject, and she's like trying to come to a club with me or something. Like that's just not going to happen. Like the earlier you learn it the better. So it's just lots of practice into oranges and then eventually on myself. But I do remember when I was keeping that food diary that I had to keep all the time, as well as like my blood sugar log, it felt very strange because it was the first time for me as a 7-year-old young girl having to be really aware and conscious of what I was eating and the effect it had on my body. And I think that is where a lot of my kind of food and body issue images stemmed from, and that is a whole different video, so I'm not going to talk about it here. But I do think kind of the way that all the metrics and the numbers and the food and the counting and everything is handled at the beginning needs a bit of work to kind of safeguard children from that kind of spiral. And also because I had lost a lot of weight before diagnosis, I was put on a very like higher calorie diet to help me gain the weight back to a healthy weight. It was things like if I was going to have milk, it had to be full fat milk, like I wasn't allowed semi-skimmed, which my mum hated because I just had to buy full fat milk all the time, and stuff like that, where I was like, this food equals weight gain, and things like that just weren't mentally healthy for me. I think that could have been done in the background without me being aware of it. Like they could have told my mum to give me those foods and not have to tell me like, you're eating this to get fatter, essentially, which was what I needed but not what my brain needed. So that was kind of the first 3 months post-diagnosis, a lot of learning. Going from fixed injections to carb counting, like I said, took a really long time. And since then I feel like as diabetes kind of new technologies or new systems have come into place, they've been implemented a lot quicker in my journey. I think the beginning, even 2 to 3 years, was very slow, going from very poor control with very limited factors that I was able to adjust to control my blood sugar, to now having the full range of carb counting, exercise, basal bolus, all the stuff that I can do to kind of pinpoint my blood sugars as much as possible. That didn't come for a very long time, which was obviously not the best for my blood sugars in the initial stages, but probably quite good in terms of me having to take on a lot of information as a small child. It probably worked quite well, just to keep me healthy and like okay at that stage. But yeah, now here we are 17 years later. Can't believe how much I've learned in these 17 years, and that's, yeah, I guess kind of why I started the channel in the first place, to kind of impart as much as I have learned over these years as possible with you, no matter what stage you are in your diabetes journey. If you were diagnosed yesterday or 30 years in, I feel like there's all lots we can learn from each other. There's not enough hours in the day for all of the diabetes clinicians. A lot of them have different opinions and only share certain things, and different technologies and different devices are only available in different regions and different countries. So the more knowledge we have in this space and shared personal experience, I think the better. So yeah, I hope this video has been helpful. And kind of like Andrea said on the She's Diabetic channel, she also shared her diabetes diagnosis recently, and she also at the end did say obviously there's been a lot of people diagnosed with type 1 diabetes since the pandemic, and I can't imagine how difficult that would have been with the limited kind of healthcare and medical support and face time with your doctors. I imagine dealing with that with your diagnosis is incredibly difficult, incredibly stressful, a very unknown space to be in. So I really do feel for you guys, and I just hope that this story can kind of give you some comfort and some hope going forwards. So yeah, my next video is probably going to be a vlog, but the one after that is hopefully going to be my pump review on the Roche Solo micro pump. I know I've been saying I'm going to be doing it for a while, but I finally have my new cannulas, and I think they are going to be the saviour. So yeah, stick around if you want to hear about my pump, and I will see you soon. Bye!